it's time for our third speaker. So, Borja Manzano Vázquez from the University of Granada, who is presenting migration, media literacy, and fake news awareness among Spanish secondary schools on social media.
Good morning, Ariana. Can you hear me?
Hi, yeah, we can hear you. You should be able to share your screen as you are a panelist in the meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's see.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so Borja, thank you for joining the webinar and the floor is yours.
Well, let me just check. Do you see if I pass to the next one, to the next slide? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. Well, good morning, everybody. First of all, I would like to thank, the organizers of this webinar for the invitation to be here today. As you can see, well, I'm presenting this study that we conducted, or that I conducted with my colleagues Sergio Castro Cortacero and Encarnación Hidalgo Tenorio. And as you can see, the title of this presentation is Migration, Media Literacy and Fake News Awareness among Spanish Secondary School Students on Social Media. Well, first of all, I would like to begin by introducing the topic a little bit and explaining the rationale for this study. Well, it is well known that social media have become the main medium for radicalization, polarization, and the spread of fake news. Over the last years, social media use has increased exponentially among teenagers, which makes them a target audience for fake news. For that reason, it is essential that nowadays students develop digital competence and, what is even more important, media literacy to enable a safe and responsible use of these platforms. Well, the aims of this study were twofold, and they were related basically to two main ideas: disinformation and migration. On the one hand, this study aimed to evaluate secondary school students' skepticism towards misinformation on social media and to explore at the same time how these students construct migration and the figure of the migrant. And on the other hand, we also aimed to compare in both cases patterns by means of different variables such as origin, age, school context, and gender. Now I'm going to move on to explain the methodology of this study, and I'm going to begin by contextualizing this study. Okay, as you can see, well, this is a map of Spain. This study was conducted in Granada, that, as you can see, it is located in the south of Spain. Okay, so close to the Mediterranean Sea and Africa, Morocco. Okay, one of the reasons why we conducted these studies, well, basically because we live and we work here. But another important reason is that if we have a look at the population in the region of Granada, we can see, well, here you can see the figure of inhabitants, the number of inhabitants in the region of Granada. But if we look more deeply into this figure, we can see that the people here who were born in Spain, it is more than 1 million inhabitants. But in the region of Granada, there is a considerable number of immigrants. Okay, so you can see that the people who were born somewhere else and have come to Granada is more than 100,000 inhabitants. And this immigration can be observed not only in the capital of Granada, but also in the rest of the province, that is, in small towns and villages included or within the region of Granada. So here I am showing the last data that we could obtain. Okay, so you can see that this immigration, as I said, is not only observed in the capital of Granada. Okay, this is the blue bars that you can see here. Okay, but also there is a considerable number of immigrants in other regions, in other places in Granada. Okay, and here you can see that these immigrants came from different continents. Okay, so they are also from the rest of Europe, like Italy, Romania. They also came from Asia, for example, China, from South America, Argentina, Venezuela, Bolivia. But they also come from Africa. For example, we have Senegal and mainly from Morocco. Okay, so we can see that the main immigrant population here in Granada is from Morocco. Okay, well, in this case, we decided to collect data in different areas of Granada because we wanted to compare how secondary school students perceive migration in different areas of the region. So that is why we collected data in the capital of Granada. Okay, and here you can see the population. Then we also collected data in a small town that, as you can see, it is called Guadix, okay, and this is in the northeastern part of Granada. We also went to a small town that is close to Granada, okay, and also we went to the south of the region, okay, in a place called Motril. Okay, this is a small town on the coast of Granada, because this is also one of the main routes for illegal immigration here in Granada. Well, in this case, we collected data in different secondary schools. Okay, so we got one high school per the small towns. Okay, participating here. Guadix, this is a small village close to Granada and Motril. And then in Granada, we wanted to collect data in different areas. So we went to two charter schools that were located in more underprivileged areas where immigration is noticeable there, okay, because there is a considerable number of immigrants in those areas. And we went to two higher schools. For example, one of them was in the city center, and they are placed in more privileged areas because we wanted to see how these areas, okay, could have an influence on their skepticism towards information, but also their perception of migration. Regarding the sample, we collected data basically in three main different grades. Okay, so we collected data from students in the third year of compulsory secondary education. Here you can see the ages. Okay, so who are 14, 15, also in the fourth year and in the first year of post-compulsory education. This is an optional course that learners can take if they want to go to the university. One of the reasons for collecting data in different grades is because, as I said before, we also wanted to see how age can influence, okay, the variables being studied. Regarding data collection, what we did was to design a questionnaire. Here you can see the first page of this questionnaire. Let me tell you that this questionnaire was divided into two different parts, okay, that, as I will explain later, they were administered in different times, okay, regarding data collection. First of all, we have to acknowledge, okay, that the collection of the data was completely anonymous, okay? So you can see that the students were required to provide a student code, that is their date of birth, okay? And then in this first part of the questionnaire, what we did was to collect personal information from the students, like their age, gender, country of birth. We were also interested in getting information about their legal guardians, for example, their father, mother, the level of education that they have completed, the country of birth, and so on. And we also explored the media that learners, students use to be informed, and the social networks that they use. Then the students in the classroom, okay, were shown four videos that were taken from X, that is former Twitter. Here you can see that these 4 videos dealt with different topics. So the first one was about the idea of climate manipulation. The next 2 videos were related to migration. Okay, so the first one was concerned with alleged mass irregular migration via Ceuta. Ceuta is a small town, okay, an autonomous city belonging to Spain, and it borders Morocco, okay, and it is also another important route for illegal massive migration. The third one was related to alleged improper financial aid for migrants. And the last one was about this homophobic attack by far-right supporters. Well, the thing is that out of these 2 videos, 2 of them reported false pieces of news, and the 2 other videos were reporting true pieces of news. Okay. Well, in this case, let me tell you a little bit about the videos. Okay, so these videos were taken from X, as I said, and in these videos, the students could see a short description. This is normally the description that they can find on the post on X. Okay, and then they had the video, okay, that accompanies that description. In this case, the videos were in Spanish, okay, and some of them were transcribed. I mean, they were subtitled so that the students could easily understand them, and we also contextualize like this short description so that they could understand more or less what the video was about. Okay, and they were like very short videos as we are used to in X. Okay, then once they watch each video, okay, they had to reply to this question: what is your first reaction when watching the video, and what do you think about its content? Okay, so we wanted to see like the first impression that they got about the video, and you can see that here they had no clue about whether this video is false or not. Okay, so we just wanted to see how they reacted to what they could see watch in the video. And then once they watched the 4 videos, we provided them with the second part of the questionnaire. So they again provided this student code. And in this case, we asked them to answer this question: have you considered that this video could contain false information? And depending on the answer, yes or no, they had to justify their choice, okay, why they thought it was false or not. Okay, and they needed to do this with all the videos. And finally, they needed to, let's say, to assess their own use of social media. So they had like different statements, and using this scale, they had to choose one option. For example, when I see any news on social media, I question the veracity of these pieces of news. Or for example, I am able to identify fake news on social media, and they had to choose the option that suits them best. Okay. Now, regarding data analysis, we used this UAM corpus, okay, tool. This is a well-known tool, okay, that it is an open one, okay, and here we established the like different variables that we wanted to analyze, from personal information to more specific variables like disinformation, critical attitude, verification, representation, and so on. Regarding the annotation protocol, I have to say that we followed a well-known annotation protocol in the field. So there were some instances of individual tagging, then some collaborative tagging, okay, that I did with my colleague, Professor Encarnación Hidalgo Tenorio, and some supervised tagging in the sense that when there was any question or doubt, we asked each other, okay? And here we have to say that we reach a high level of agreement, okay, from 0.81 to 1 point, okay? Well, today, due to time constraints, I'm going to focus on the data to see how this data can help us to understand potential differences between the city and the province, and how it can help us to uncover potential differences between deprived and non-deprived neighborhoods in the city. Well, in this case, as this is the main topic of the research project, migration, freedom of movement, and so on, I'm going to report the data that we obtained, well, some of the data that we obtained concerning the two videos dealing with migration. And here I'm going to focus on the data obtained in the high school in this small village close to Granada, and one chapter school that, as I said, it is in an underprivileged area, and the high school that was in a more privileged one. Here you can see the number of participants that we are talking about. Okay, so we had 165 participants in this context. Okay, you can see that they were more or less homogeneous in the number of participants that we had in each context. They were mainly in the third year of compulsory secondary education. They were like 14, 15 years old, although we also were able to get access to other groups, because I have to say that this is because we got access, we got permission from the from the center, okay, the school. Okay, it is not, we couldn't get access to all the groups because they were involved in teaching and so on. But in this case, we could get access to the fourth year and post-compulsory secondary education. And here you can see that most of the participants were born in Spain, but we also had other students who were born somewhere else in other continents like Europe, Africa, South and North America. So now, what are the results that we obtained? Well, first of all, I'm going to report the data that we got regarding this information in this context. Concerning gender, we observed that, for example, males were more skeptical of one of the videos on migration. And regarding females, we can say that they tend to use more emotional language, and this emotional language tends to be more negative, and they tend to evaluate the event from their own perspective, from their own point of view. Regarding the school, we observed that the students at the school in the province, they tended to be more skeptical, not just of one of the videos, but when they were skeptical, they tended to rely on the content, that is the description that they had, and also the video, the images that they could watch. And at the same time, they were also more opinionated, okay, concerning the topic observed. Regarding age, it is interesting to highlight that, for example, while younger students are or tended to be more skeptical, and they, in this sense, they relied on the video, that is, they rely on the images, what they can watch in the piece of news. Older students, however, are more opinionated, and in this case, in order to explain whether they think this is false or true, they tend to rely on the text provided, that is, the description that they got in the piece of news. Regarding origin, we could observe that, for example, the students who were born in Spain, they tended to use emotion in a more implicit way, in a more subtle way, and in a more negative way. However, the students born outside of Spain, they used emotion, but in a more explicit way and in a more positive way. Okay, because in this sense, the thing is that they tend to empathize with the people that they can watch in the videos, basically because maybe they also went through the same situation, or maybe, well, in this case, they are immigrants. Okay, so not just them, but also their parents. Concerning migration, that is how these students constructed a migration and the figure of the migrant, we could observe that regarding gender, for example, females tend to be more discursively visible. That is, they tend to be more observed in the speech, in the sense that they tend to use more I think, I believe, and so on. They also construe migrants as affected participants, okay, participants receiving rather than doing the action. And they talk about Spanish society in relation to migration. And for example, here I have included this quote from one of the students: "Not many people are understanding. They just look out for themselves. They don't stop to think that immigrants are simply trying to build a better future." Regarding school, we observed that the students at the school in the province, they tended to talk about the impact of migration on Spain, and they did so in a more negative way, that is predominantly using like negative terms. Okay, for example, here we have one example. We can see how they refer to this as the massive illegal immigration that Spain is suffering, with those immigrants who think they can. However, students at the school in the city, they tend to be more interested in migration. So let's say that they have like a more positive perception of migration. So as opposed to the students in the province, okay, we could say that they are like more open-minded in this way, and they tend to see migration as something that can contribute to the society. For example, migrants also help us. Regarding age, it is interesting to highlight, for example, that younger students construe migrants and migration as involved in generally negative relational processes. But here, it is worth noting that as students grow up, as we can see here in these older students, in this case, they construe migrants and migration as involved in this case, also negative but material processes. And we can see that as they grow up, they tend to be more critical concerning the Spanish government, and they also tend to focus on what they expect the Spanish government to address. They expect the Spanish government to address what they perceive as mass migration, as we can see here. On many occasions, they can cause harm to that country instead of cooperating, or Spain should make a radical change and take a very hard line concerning migration. And regarding origin, it is interesting to see how the students who are born in Spain, they tend to use more ontological metaphors when they refer to migration. So, for example, in their speech, they tend to include this idea of the container, the object, the nature metaphors. As we can see here, my first impression is that Spain is going to fill up with moros. Okay, moros is like a pejorative term that is used normally to refer to people coming from Morocco, okay? Or for example, they send them back to where they came from. However, as we saw before, the students who are born outside of Spain, they tend to write about migration, not just more frequently, but also with greater empathy. Okay, so for example, they refer to the impact and sadness, thinking about the sacrifice it takes to cross borders, losing family members, or for example, those people need that money. I'm sure they don't even have enough money to pay the rent, so I think it's fine. Okay, so they are able to put in those people's shoes. Okay, so just to finish, what are the conclusions that we can draw from this study? Well, the main conclusions that we can draw from this study is that, well, as we can see, students are exposed to these pieces of news, that they tend to spread not just fake news, but also hate speech and so on. So the main conclusions that we can draw are related to the field of education. So we think that these findings emphasize the pedagogical implications, okay, and the need for education that addresses fake news but also hate speech concerning migration, because as I said before, teenagers are one of the target audiences for this news, and especially because of the use that they make nowadays of social media. So it is essential that, for example, teachers nowadays try to make students aware of what fake news is, because sometimes they are not even aware that the information that they have on social media can be false. And also, it is necessary to familiarize them with fact checking resources and strategies. And concerning the concept of migration, the figure of the migrant, it is necessary to foster empathy. And that is why we think that it is important to emphasize intergroup contact. The fact that nowadays in many classrooms we have like many cultural backgrounds, so it is essential that students learn to work with others, but also to learn from their stories. Okay, all the personal background that those students who are immigrant they have, not just them but also their families. And also it is essential that we try to counter this impact threat framings with critical data literacy, but also personal narratives from these migrants, okay, from these students. And well, that's all regarding this presentation. So thank you very much for your attention. And if you have any question, I will be glad to answer them. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Borja. I'm sure there are some questions. Okay, probably they're still thinking about that question. So, hi, I actually have one. So, in order to break the ice. So, uh, this was really interesting, and I'm also very passionate about appraisal and so on. So, are you also considering to expand your study, meaning including students from other regions, from other places, in order to see whether their perceptions maybe can further vary from a topic perspective?
Well, it is one possibility that we have. Okay. In this case, our next step would be to conduct this study, but at the university level. Okay,
Mhm.
so we want to see how students, okay, and in different degrees, how they react to these pieces of news, okay, because we want to see, to compare if they become skeptical or not. Maybe, yeah, it could be the next step. I know that it won't be easy, okay, because I mean, just conducting this study, it took us a lot of time, okay, not just contacting the schools, but also getting the consent from the legal guardians, the parents, and so on. And it is also very demanding in terms of data analysis, because
Mhm.
here we have like just 165 participants, but we are just talking about three students, sorry, three contexts, and we had like seven. Yeah, I think it would be interesting, but we would need more time, yeah, to do it. But yeah,
Absolutely.
it would be
Absolutely.
maybe not just in Spain, but also in other countries.
Okay. Just a quick one. Did you notice any differences from students, for instance, that were born in Europe or in other continents?
Sorry, born in Europe.
Because you showed like a table
Yeah.
with students that were born in different places. Uh,
In
so are
this
there
case,
any differences or?
well, in this case, the thing is that we had like few students, okay, who were born somewhere else, okay, because, but more or less they have like the same perception.
Hmm.
They are they show this empathy, okay, towards people coming from other places, especially because, as I said, they also experience that, okay, so they know what it is to leave your country to go to another place, that you are like yeah, you are a foreigner in that place, and it is not easy to sometimes to socialize. But in this case, I don't remember any special difference in that sense.
Okay, thank you. So are there any questions? Okay, so if not, I have another one actually. Promise this will be my last one. So this is probably something that I missed at the beginning of your presentation, or probably that you didn't mention. Um, give students information regarding disinformation, fake news, to make them familiarize with this topic before asking them to complete a survey. Yeah.
No, because in that case, we could think that maybe that could bias the data, okay? Because maybe they could know that we are focusing on that. So that is why, for example, when we gave them the questionnaire, this was divided into two parts. So in the first one, they were shown the video, as I said, and after that, they just replied concerning their first reaction. So we wanted to see how they reacted when watching the video. And then once they watched the four videos, we gave them the second part. And here we gave them, let's say, more or less like a clue, because we asked them, have you considered that this could contain false information? And then they had to reply yes, no, and depending on the answer they had to justify, because something that we have not done here is to compare the answers that they gave in the first questions with the answers in the second question. Okay, that
Okay.
is like another thing that we need to do, because, well, as I said, we have a lot of data and it is very difficult to summarize everything here. But now we want to see their first reaction, to see whether they thought, okay, I have watched this, but maybe this is false. So maybe I don't need to believe all of this. Okay, that is something that we still need to do.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the floor? Okay, so if not, let's thank Borja for his presentation.